What happens when two music legends sit down for what should be a friendly chat, but instead find themselves locked in a battle over artistic integrity that spirals completely out of control? What you're about to witness is one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history, where Lionel Richie, the man behind countless classics, finds himself pushed to his absolute breaking point by Kelly Clarkson's relentless questioning. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly respect can turn to confrontation when egos collide and boundaries get crossed. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused this explosive encounter, because what unfolds here will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about these two superstars. The Kelly Clarkson show set was buzzing with its usual energy as Lionel Richie settled into the guest chair, his legendary smile gleaming under the studio lights. Kelly, radiating her characteristic warmth, leaned forward with genuine excitement. "Lionel, I have to say, having you here is literally a dream come true for me," Kelly began, her voice filled with admiration. "Your music has been the soundtrack to so many people's lives, including mine. I mean, who hasn't slow danced to All Night Long, or cried to Hello at least once in their life?" Lionel chuckled, clearly comfortable in the spotlight he had occupied for decades. "Well, Kelly, that's very kind of you to say. You know, when I write these songs, I never really know how they're going to touch people's hearts. It's always been about creating something authentic, something that comes from a real place inside me." "That's exactly what I want to talk about," Kelly said, her tone shifting slightly more serious. "Authenticity in music. Because you've been in this business for what, over 40 years now, and you've seen it all change. The way music is made, the way it's consumed, everything's different now." "It certainly is," Lionel agreed, adjusting his position in the chair. "But good music is good music, Kelly. It doesn't matter if it's recorded in $1 million studio or on someone's phone. If it comes from the heart, people will feel it." Kelly nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. But here's what I've been thinking about lately, and I'd love to get your perspective on this. Do you think some artists from your generation, the legends like yourself, ever feel threatened by how accessible music creation has become? I mean, now anyone can make a song in their bedroom and potentially have a hit." The question hung in the air for a moment, and viewers could see Lionel's expression shift almost imperceptibly. His smile remained, but something flickered in his eyes. "Threatened," he repeated slowly. "Kelly, I think you might be misunderstanding something fundamental here. Music isn't about competition, it's about connection. I've never felt threatened by young artists or new technology. If anything, I've always tried to mentor and support the next generation." "Oh, I didn't mean it like that," Kelly quickly clarified, but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't backing down entirely. "I'm talking more about the craft itself. Like you spent years learning your instruments, studying composition, working with the best producers and musicians. Now someone can use AI to write lyrics and auto-tune to fix their voice. Doesn't that diminish what you and your peers accomplished?" Lionel's jaw tightened slightly. "Kelly, I think you're creating a false narrative here. Every generation of musicians has used the tools available to them. When I started with the Commodores, we used synthesizers and electronic instruments that the generation before us might have considered cheating. Progress isn't the enemy of artistry. But surely you have to admit there's a difference between learning to play a synthesizer and having a computer write your melody for you." Kelly pressed on, seemingly unaware of the growing tension in Lionel's posture. "I mean, when you wrote We Are the World, that came from your soul, your experience, your understanding of music theory and human emotion. Can an algorithm really replicate that kind of depth? Are you suggesting that modern artists lack soul?" Lionel's voice was still controlled, but there was an edge creeping in that hadn't been there moments before. "Because that's what it sounds like you're saying." Kelly held up her hands defensively. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just trying to understand how you reconcile the past with the present. Like, you've worked with some incredible artists over the years, Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, Paul McCartney. Those collaborations were built on mutual respect and genuine musical chemistry. But now I see artists who've never met collaborating through email and file sharing. Doesn't something get lost in that process?" "What gets lost, Kelly, is your point," Lionel said, his famous warmth beginning to fade. "You're painting broad strokes about an entire generation of artists, and frankly, it's starting to sound more like judgment than journalism." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the lighthearted conversation they had expected from two beloved musicians. Kelly seemed to realize she was walking into dangerous territory, but instead of pulling back, she doubled down. "I'm not judging anyone, Lionel. I'm asking legitimate questions about the evolution of music. And honestly, as someone who came up through American Idol, who had to prove myself in front of millions of people week after week, I think I have some insight into what it takes to make it in this business." "Insight into what it takes?" Lionel eyebrows shot up. "Kelly, With all due respect to your journey, you auditioned for a television show. I spent years playing in clubs, writing songs that got rejected, learning my craft the hard way before anyone knew my name. There's a difference between proving yourself on TV and proving yourself in the music industry. The words hit Kelly like a slap. Her cheeks flushed slightly, and for a moment, the confident talk show host looked genuinely rattled. That's pretty condescending. Lionel, American Idol might have been a TV show, but the competition was real, the pressure was real, and the music I've made since then has touched millions of people's lives. I'm not diminishing your success, Lionel replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'm simply pointing out that your experience of the music industry is very different from mine, and maybe that's coloring your perspective on what constitutes authentic artistry. My perspective. Kelly's voice rose slightly. Lionel, I've sold over 25 million albums worldwide. I've won Grammys. I've written songs that have resonated with people across the globe. I think my perspective on music is pretty well earned. Sales figures don't equal artistic credibility. Kelly, Lionel shot back, his legendary composure beginning to crack. And when Kelly's face flushed a deeper shade of red as she processed Lionel's accusation. The studio lights seemed harsher now, illuminating every uncomfortable expression on both their faces. She straightened in her chair, her media training kicking in as she attempted to salvage what was quickly becoming a disaster. Lionel, I think you're completely misreading this situation, she said, her voice steady but strained. I'm not trying to manipulate anyone or create drama. These are legitimate questions that music fans and industry professionals discuss all the time. Uncomfortable. Lionel's voice carried a sharp edge now. Kelly, I've been answering questions about music longer than you've been alive. What makes me uncomfortable is being ambushed by someone who's supposed to be celebrating music, not dissecting it like some failed music journalist looking for controversy. The insult landed like a physical blow. Kelly's eyes narrowed, and, for the first time since the interview began, her famous warmth completely evaporated. Failed music journalist. Lionel, I'm not sure what's gotten into you today, but that was completely uncalled for. Kelly leaned forward, her professional composure slipping further. You know what, Lionel? Maybe the reason you're feeling attacked is because there's some truth to what I'm saying. Maybe you are struggling to stay relevant in today's music landscape, and instead of admitting that, you're lashing out at me. The words hit the studio like a bomb. Several audience members audibly gasped, and even the camera operators seemed to freeze. Lionel's expression shifted from annoyed to genuinely angry, his legendary cool completely shattered. Stay relevant, he repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. Kelly, I was selling out stadiums and topping charts when you were still dreaming of making it past the first round of auditions. My songs are played at weddings and celebrations around the world every single day. And that's great, Lionel, it really is. Kelly shot back, her own anger now fully unleashed. But timeless doesn't mean current. When was the last time you had a #1 hit? When was the last time young people discovered your music organically instead of through their parents' playlists? The studio fell deadly silent. Lionel stared at Kelly for a long moment, his jaw working as if he were chewing over his response. You want to talk about current, Kelly? You've been riding the wave of your American Idol victory for over 20 years now. Your biggest hits are behind you. Your talk show is struggling in the ratings, and you're sitting here trying to tear down legends to make yourself feel better. Kelly's mouth fell open in shock. When she finally found her voice, it was shaking with fury. My declining career, Lionel, at least I'm still making new music that people actually care about. At least I'm not living entirely off songs I wrote in the 80s. I understand perfectly well what's happening here, Lionel fired back. I understand that you've built your entire career on other people's songs and manufactured drama, and now you're trying to drag me down to your level. The accusation was so harsh that several audience members actually looked away in embarrassment. Kelly's face went white, then red again, cycling through emotions rapidly. Other people's songs, she repeated, her voice barely controlled. Lionel, I've written or co-written most of my biggest hits. Since you've been gone, stronger, because of you, these aren't covers. Co-written, Lionel emphasized mockingly. That's the key phrase there, isn't it, Kelly? You need a team of writers to create what real artists do alone. You need an entire industry apparatus to make you look like something you're not. Kelly stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that echoed through the silent studio. That's enough, Lionel. You don't get to come on my show and insult my talent, my work ethic, and my integrity, your integrity. Lionel remained seated, his posture rigid with anger. Kelly, you invited me here under false pretenses, tried to bait me into controversy, and when I called you out on it, you attacked my career. What exactly about that suggests integrity? But you're not a journalist, are you, Kelly? Lionel's voice was cold now, clinical in its precision. You're a talk show host who got lucky on a reality show and has been coasting on that success ever since. Kelly's hands were shaking now. Whether from anger or hurt was impossible to tell. You know what, Lionel? I've interviewed hundreds of artists on this show, and not one of them has ever spoken to me the way you're speaking to me right now. Maybe that's because none of them were being ambushed by someone pretending to be a fan while actually trying to diminish their legacy. Lionel replied coldly. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Crew members were looking at each other nervously, unsure whether they should intervene or keep rolling. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing what felt like a private argument, broadcast for public consumption. Lionel, this is my show, Kelly said, her voice rising. You're a guest here, which means you're in my house. I don't care how many records you've sold, you don't get to come in here and dictate how this interview goes. Lionel's eyes flashed with something dangerous. Your house. Kelly, this might be your set, but this is still the music industry. And in this industry, respect is earned through talent and longevity, not through reality show victories and manufactured charm. Respect has to be mutual, Kelly, Lionel replied, his voice like ice. And you lost my respect the moment you decided that ambushing me was more important than actually celebrating music. The confrontation had reached a point where both participants seemed to have forgotten they were on television, that millions of people would eventually see this exchange. They were locked in a battle of egos and wounded pride, each determined to emerge victorious regardless of the cost. Kelly stood there for a moment, her chest rising and falling as she tried to process what was happening. The woman who had built her career on being America's sweetheart, the relatable girl next door who could sing anything and make it sound effortless, was now face to face with one of music's most respected legends, and it was all falling apart in the most public way possible. You know what, Lionel? Kelly said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. I think I know what this is really about. This isn't about my questions or my interview style or anything I've said today. This is about you feeling irrelevant, and instead of dealing with that like an adult, you're taking it out on me. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Lionel's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to fury to something that looked almost like betrayal. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that the studio microphones barely picked it up. Irrelevant, he repeated, as if tasting the word. Kelly, do you have any idea what you just said? Do you understand who you're talking to? I'm talking to someone who clearly has issues with successful women. Kelly shot back, her own anger now matching his. Someone who can't handle being questioned by someone younger. Someone who maybe represents everything he's afraid of about the changing music industry. Lionel slowly stood up from his chair, his movements deliberate and controlled in a way that somehow made them more intimidating than if he had jumped up in rage. The studio seemed to hold its collective breath as the legendary musician rose to his full height, his eyes never leaving Kelly's face. Issues with successful women. His voice was deadly calm now, which was somehow more frightening than when he had been shouting. Kelly, I've worked with Diana Ross, Dolly Parton, Madonna, Beyoncé. I've written songs for women who have more talent in their little finger than you have in your entire body. My issue isn't with successful women, my issue is with mediocre people who think success gives them the right to disrespect their betters. The insult was so brutal, so calculated, that several people in the audience actually gasped audibly. Kelly's face went completely pale, then flushed red as the full impact of his words hit her. Mediocre, she whispered, and for the first time in the entire exchange, she sounded genuinely hurt rather than just angry. Lionel, how dare you call me mediocre? I have sold millions of albums. I have won Grammy Awards. I have built a career that has lasted decades. Built on what foundation, Kelly? Lionel asked, his voice still that terrifying calm. On a reality show victory. On covers of other people's songs. On a talk show where you interview people who are actually talented. You're a karaoke singer who got lucky, and deep down, you know it. The studio was so quiet now that you could hear the hum of the air conditioning system. Kelly stood there, visibly shaking, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but the microphones picked up every word. Get out, she said simply. Lionel raised an eyebrow. Excuse me, I said get out, Kelly repeated, her voice gaining strength. Get off my stage, get out of my studio, get away from me. I don't care who you are or what you've accomplished. Nobody, and I mean nobody, talks to me like that in my own house. For a moment, Lionel looked genuinely surprised, as if he hadn't expected Kelly to stand up to him so directly. But then, his expression hardened again, and he shook his head with what looked like disgust. Gladly, he said, reaching up to remove his wireless microphone. This has been the most unprofessional, disrespectful interview experience of my entire career, and I've been doing this for 40 years. He handed the microphone to a stunned production assistant who had materialized beside him, then looked directly into the nearest camera. To anyone watching this, he said, his voice carrying the full weight of his decades in the entertainment industry. What you've witnessed here today is not journalism, it's not entertainment. It's a desperate attempt by a fading star to create controversy at the expense of people who actually built this industry. Kelly's mouth fell open in shock. Are you seriously going to blame me for this on television? You're the one who started insulting me. You're the one who called me mediocre. Lionel turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes was colder than anything that had come before. Kelly, I called you what you are. The fact that you can't handle the truth about yourself says more about you than it does about me. The truth. Kelly's voice cracked slightly. The truth is that you came on my show expecting to be treated like royalty, and when I asked you real questions, instead of just fawning over you, you couldn't handle it. The truth is that you're exactly the kind of out-of-touch dinosaur I was talking about, and you're exactly the kind of talentless wannabe that's ruining the music industry. Lionel shot back. Congratulations, Kelly, you've managed to turn what should have been a celebration of music into a public embarrassment for both of us. With that, he turned and began walking toward the edge of the stage. The cameras followed him, capturing every step as one of music's greatest legends made his exit from what was supposed to be a friendly talk show appearance. Don't you walk away from me, Kelly called after him, her professional composure completely shattered now. Don't you dare walk away from me while I'm talking to you. Lionel paused at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time. Kelly, I've wasted enough of my time on this disaster. Some people deserve respect because of what they've accomplished. Others demand respect because of what they think they deserve. Figure out which one you are. I know exactly what I am. Kelly shouted, her voice echoing through the stunned studio. I'm someone who worked her way up from nothing, who earned everything she has, who doesn't need some washed up has-been to validate her career. But Lionel was already walking away, his security detail closing ranks around him as he headed for the exit. The cameras caught his final moments on the set, his posture straight and dignified despite the chaos he was leaving behind. Kelly stood alone on her stage, breathing heavily, her hair slightly disheveled from the emotional intensity of the confrontation. The audience sat in complete silence, unsure whether they should applaud, boo, or simply sit there in shock. Well, Kelly said finally, her voice shaky as she tried to regain some semblance of composure. I guess that's not how any of us expected this interview to go. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes still bright with unshed tears of anger and humiliation. You know what, folks? Sometimes you meet people who aren't who you thought they were. Sometimes your heroes disappoint you in ways you never imagined possible. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, drawing on reserves of strength that had carried her through years of criticism and doubt. But I want everyone watching to know that I stand by every question I asked today. I stand by my right as a journalist and as a fellow artist to ask real questions about the music industry, about artistry, about what it means to stay relevant in a changing world. She paused, taking a deep breath before delivering her final thoughts on the disaster that had just unfolded. Lionel Richie is undeniably a legend, and his contributions to music are undeniable. But legends aren't above criticism, they aren't above having their ideas challenged, and they certainly aren't above treating other people with